Paul Roos here from Performance by Design, and welcome to today's Culture Couch with my partner in crime, Jared Murphy. Now, Murph,
hello, Rizzy.
You've been that excited all day today.
I have.
You've been pushing for this bloke to come on for about 3 weeks.
Mate, this is the...
And I'm hoping he's going to verify your claim that you turned that football club single-handedly around.
Don't start
So we're
this.
finally going to get to the source.
Don't
Ryan
start
Cook, the current CEO of the Geelong Football Club, is on the Culture Couch today. Cooky, how are you, mate? Good to see you. Now, before we delve into Murph's success single-handedly at the footy club, mate, I've learned a couple of things about you today, but a coaching background. I mean, you assistant coach at East Perth, and then you went on to coach Ainsley. So I guess purely from a leadership point of view, how was that experience going from a player? You played obviously a lot. How did you find coaching in that era?
I was relatively successful without being a great coach, if I could put it that way. I was so determined and I was so task-driven. Probably left a little bit of a mess behind me at times. But there was no doubt that being a player under John Kennedy, David Parkin and a few others really taught me a hell of a lot about leadership. And then I did a physical education degree, so as a teacher you are a leader. Ended up doing a master's degree in West Australia as well. And honed in on, believe this or not, I did my thesis on participative planning methods in sport and rec, which gave me a whole new world of collaboration and how to involve people to get joint decision making and so on. So you had to lead in a different way than what was the norm then. Very autocratic then generally. And so I think that gave me the basis to lead in a different way in the following years.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that notion of leadership back then, and a couple of people you mentioned, Parko coached me as well, but it was very autocratic, wasn't it? It was very do this, do that. But we also had the opportunity to learn elsewhere through study or work, et cetera, et cetera. So what was the balance, do you think, of what you picked up from the pure football playing and the coaches as opposed to the academic side and then going into work?
I think I had a combination of both. If there was a weighting, oh goodness me, I'd say it would be probably more academic than practical. I'm not sure if my friends would agree with that, my colleagues, but that's how I said it. I mean, when I finished my degree, I went and worked with the Department for Sport and Recreation in Perth. And one of my tasks was to put the Level 2 general syllabus together for all of Australia, Level 2 coaching.
Yeah, right.
And so I had a fair understanding of the theory around coaching from a basic level right through to Level 4 at the time under the accreditation scheme. And so I used that and it helped me make a lot of decisions in footy. I was actually... when I was at East Perth, I was the assistant coach at East Perth. And I also did the physette, the strength and conditioning at the same time because I had that background. And so I was a bit of an all-rounder, and I think I was pretty cheap to get at the time because you could pay me tuppence and I had three roles. But no, I think more academic. I was never a great player. I was a very average player. I played 50-odd games with Hawthorn and Melbourne. I went to Melbourne for a year. I never played a senior game for Hawthorn, but I played a half a dozen for Melbourne. But I was just a battler. I was really a battler. I was a slow midfielder.
What did you learn by that, though? I mean, because often we hear from the great players and we hear the messages from the great players. What did you learn from that period, being battler, as you call yourself?
No, you develop unbelievable resilience. There's no doubt about that. You become a really good judge of talent and what talent really is.
You're looking through a different lens.
And whether you compare yourself with other people because you lack pace and you lack the skills and the finesse, you understand why some other people are getting games and you don't. Whereas a lot of talented people never do that.
No, it's a good point.
It just comes to them as though it's natural. I am the best player. I am quick. I can do things and achieve the same as you can without actually trying.
You tell that story, Riz, yourself, don't you? You didn't realise until the end of your career.
I talk about my last year, Cooky, was 98, and it was funny sitting on the bench. It was probably the most I'd learned about my teammates from a leadership point of view from the other 16 years, because when you're only looking at through one lens, it's really hard to see. So it's a great point.
Yeah.
So when you put that sort of package together of playing but not getting a game, as long as you learn from it, I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, you do. I'm sure. Even today, I try not to fall in love with talent quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can all get carried away with seeing the beautiful marks and kicks, and why we go to footy. You know, that's what it's like. But I don't want to fall in love with that person quickly because I've got to figure out whether he's going to be good for us longer term.
Yeah.
You know,
we all get seduced by talent.
We get seduced by talent, and it's, you know, I understand we pay for it, but I actually make it a bit of a mandate to just to hold back a bit if that's the right way.
And so then you move into admin, Cooky. Well, I guess West Coast Eagles is an interesting club in its own right when it first came around. So talk us about, what did you learn from coaching, playing, that you took then into your administrative career? And talk us about West Coast Eagles in those days. It was You were in charge when they won their first 2 premierships.
Yeah.
First interstate premierships.
Yeah. There's a bit in that question, mate. I'll try and remember the question.
That's right.
Because of the background in planning methods, participative planning methods, I took that to the West Coast Eagles. Before the West Coast Eagles, I was with the West Australian Footy Commission, and that really helped me in relation to very much around strategic planning, the business planning, planning around the commercial side, the non-commercial side, the finance side, whatever. I think that really helped me. I understood footy backwards. That really helped me. I still believe a CEO who understands his trade that he's in is an advantage. It can't be a disadvantage. And for me, it was a big advantage. And so I understood Mickey Malta's mentality when he came over, because I had John Kennedy, you know. I understood Mick backwards. I understood the commercial realities of what was happening in Perth because of my experience in finance elsewhere. And so I think it was a job that I'd sort of been living for.
Yeah, okay.
And I got it. There was a stage there where, we were in real trouble. When I arrived at the Eagles, we were a public company on the share market. They had raised around about $8 million, I think. My memory's not great on this, but $6 to $8 million, I think, on the share market. They'd given it all to the AFL in the first year, pretty much, for the licence, for the players, for the transfer fees in the good old days. And they had no money left. And so by the time I got there, it was a real, how do we save this club?
Yeah.
And, you know, the shareholders who owned, the big shareholders, they end up taking a lesser amount for their shares, and they sacrificed a bit, and we survived. And then we got Mickey Malthouse in, and he changed the fortunes because we started winning. Yeah, okay. And I can tell you, footy's a lot easier when you're winning. You know, CEOs can sit back and say, look, you know, our role is to make sure that we fill up the stadiums irrespective of the outcome.
Hard to do.
It's hard to do, I can tell you. Much easier when you're winning games.
Yeah. So what do you think the mistakes that were made, you know, when they initially set that club? Because it was obviously relatively new. I think, what was it, Brisbane Bears in
then Adelaide?
In Adelaide.
Yeah, then us.
And then...
Was it the other way around? No, anyway, yeah.
Bears were the first. Bears were the first,
yeah. I'll keep this to a real practical level. It's the first time I'm probably going to have said this. That there's probably two that stand out for me. One is the undervaluing and understanding of membership.
Yeah.
They had 3,000 members first year and 7,000 shareholders.
Right.
And we should have had 30,000 members and 7,000 shareholders. And they were the days when the home team split the gate.
Right.
So if you've only got 3,000 members and 30,000 are turning up, the 27,000 payers on the day, half of that money is going to the opposition club, going back to Melbourne.
Big siphon of money, isn't it?
That was an error. I think the other error, maybe this is a bit harsh, but I think early on there was too many West Australian style players picked, and a real strong move to get West Australian players back because they understood West Australian football. But West Australian football was often played in space.
I remember going over there in 1980. I played Teal Cup in 1980 for Victoria, and it was like playing on a nullarbor plane. They were that big, the ground. So it was unbelievable. To your point, it's a really interesting point. Because even now, it's changed now, but even playing Subi, we used to go over there and train a game on that ground. Because it was half a kick. So it was a different game, wasn't it?
And the West Australian style of being playing on those sorts of grounds was, find space.
Yeah.
Whereas in Victoria, you found packs. Close the ball up. And, And I think we had a little bit too many of those. But Mick changed that. Mickey Malthouse changed that pretty much with his style of play, with his style of coaching.
And on that, the decision, which is quite interesting because we know how passionate Western Australia, having played state footy, played state footy against Western Australians, they're very parochial and very passionate. That's one of their great strengths. But clearly, by your own admission, maybe setting a club up, it can be one of your great weaknesses. So even the decision to get Mick across as a Victorian, how was that?
Look, it was. I think it was 50-50 at the beginning. But he with all of the wins, there's nothing better than a successful coach, and he was successful, very successful. Players loved him. He had a really forthright understanding of what happens in how to win finals, which is another issue again. And Mick wasn't the easiest person, but I don't think any coach is to manage, because he was so focused and at times had, I think, some tunnel vision, but that was part of his strength as well. He was a very good coach.
And the first premiership, that must have been an amazing time to be in Perth.
Yeah, it was 1992 against Geelong, and 94 against Geelong, by the way. Yeah, it was. I remember coming over the border in the plane, and just as we were crossing the border, the pilot got up and said, "This is the first time the AFL Cup has ever been taken out of Melbourne." I remember that clearly, but it was, I think it was a landmark for the game in many ways that the Victorians didn't have the game to themselves anymore.
You've got a unique perspective on the game because it's changed so dramatically. But to be an administrator, CEO of two clubs, and I suppose fast tracking to Geelong, it's become much more around the whole club, hasn't it? I mean, with all due respect to admin people and certainly when I first started, but even in the early 90s, if you've got a good coach and you've got some star players, you're pretty well guaranteed to finish top four. It's not that simple now. It's changed dramatically from a talent-based organisation to behavioural-based, where you need everything aligning. Board, CEO, coach, recruiting. Is that a fair comment from a CEO's point of view?
Yeah, it is. I think, some time ago, 20 years ago, let's say, you had three departments: finance, footy and commercial. You had footy spending the money, commercial attracting the money, and finance monitoring it all, That was it. Yeah. It's a very simple model. And if you picked a coach and some good players,
you're fine.
That was the buzz, you know. And as time progressed, clubs understood that, we need to get a competitive advantage. And leading teams, in my opinion, were a great competitive advantage for clubs. But then, 10 years later, 17 clubs have got leading teams. So you try and find another competitive advantage, and you look at, values and culture, and make sure your culture is fantastic over a period of time. And, you build, your recruitment around your culture, you build your style of play around your culture, you do all. And so that becomes the competitive advantage. Then, people say, hang on, it's the facilities. And so you go down this arms race for the best facilities in Australia. And so there's money being spent all over Australia, 50 million here, 100 million. And so it just, there's the layers just keep getting more and more relevant, I suppose, or placed upon the model. But the thing we've got to make sure is that, each of those layers must be making a difference to the organisation, or don't have them. Don't have them. They have to make a meaningful difference. And it gets debatable now when you put layers on it, like human resources, people and culture, community development. You put all these layers, which aren't necessarily, traditional core purpose, but they're becoming core purpose now, and we're finding the best clubs have all of these layers. Not just the best 6 players in the league, but they have all these layers that make a difference to the whole club
and sometimes
and the community.
And they can be cross-purpose sometimes. I reckon.
They can be, absolutely.
Which makes it even more difficult.
Makes it even more difficult. It's like your mission. Sometimes there's a part of your mission which is more important than another because of you haven't got the dollars anymore. So you start saying, well, which part of this mission do we
Murph, I'll bring you in the conversation because you've got a great perspective on Geelong and looking from an external perspective coming in and working with Cooky and the crew. What did you see of the football club that perhaps Cooky didn't see at the time? Or maybe he did see, but he couldn't see.
There's a lot of things I don't see.
Yeah. What do you think they didn't see?
Well, Brian and I go back a long time because I was actually working as a PR consultant when Cooky first came in. So I was sort of semi-involved with the club when Brian took over and had to go through negotiations with the bank. And at that stage, the club was in all sorts of trouble, wasn't it? It was at risk of going into extinction.
Risk of falling over.
Yeah. And so I was lucky enough probably to see right from the beginning Brian and Frank's, I guess you two worked the dynamic duo, really.
Yeah, he's a good man, Frank.
Yeah. Their vision for the club. So it was, they had to have a vision far beyond, I think, what anyone else could have possibly had at that point. Otherwise, you wouldn't have got out of it.
No.
And so I just remember them ticking one box off at a time.
Yeah.
Slowly getting there.
But even that, Cooky, how important, for those who don't know Frank Costa, who was the president at the time, how important is that alignment for you as CEO and the chairman?
Oh, it's the most important thing. Someone said, what's the one most important thing in the footy club outside of winning?
Yep.
It's the relationship between the president and the CEO. I think. I can throw the coach in there, but the reality is the CEO and the president don't always talk to the coach, and they don't always bring him into business dealings.
Exactly.
We rely on the coach unbelievably, but it's not as though we work on a day-to-day basis. We don't.
Well, it's interesting your observation, Murph, of how close that relationship was and how important that was. And then when you got inside the club, Murph, what did you see once you were inside the club?
Good people, really good people. But for whatever reason, just hadn't been able to put it together. Weren't having honest conversations, really. That was the truth of it, wasn't it? So we just had to get really honest with each other. And Brian, I think, is probably the best advocate I've ever seen of a CEO and values-based leadership. So right from before I started Cooky, you were talking about values-based leadership. And so when I came in, it was really, in some ways, I guess, giving the club the framework to sort of implement what you've been telling them anyway, around good to great.
Yeah, and Frank Costa was very values-based. When I went for my interview for the job, I went to his Derrimut logistics office in Victoria, and on his wall in reception it had character first, talent second. So he was living that, and he'd actually had a program that he'd pinched from the US around a character first program, which had 52 values in it, one for every week. I could just see a wall full of 52 values. My goodness.
Right.
And so 1 week might be on resilience, or it might be on determination, or it might be on adventurous or whatever. And he would have the employee of the week around Australia under the Costa Group, and they'd have this recognition ceremony for that particular person, for that particular value, to promote that value for the week.
Which would have been unusual back then.
We're talking 99,
Yeah,
98.
absolutely. Which is incredible. So obviously I think we beat in 2005 in that really tough game.
Yeah.
What were you seeing through that period that was most frustrating for you as the CEO? And often, to be clear to the people watching, it's a difficult role, the CEO of a football club, because you not only from a commercial point of view, but you don't know when to jump into the footy department and jump into the coach, and you're the conduit between the board, and so there's a lot of interactions that are going on. But what were you seeing you didn't really like? Because I know you did the review at the end of 06 was the review?
Yep, end of 06, yeah.
What were you seeing that you didn't really like?
The inconsistency in our performance. Because we had the talent.
Yeah.
To me, we had
enough. So you felt you had the talent?
I felt, I'd go to training and I would see the ball not dropped for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I would say, this side is unbelievably talented.
Yeah.
And so that inconsistency of our performance was really frustrating. And look, you can put it down to the boys getting free beer tickets on weekends and all of those things in Geelong in a small pond. But by and large, as Murph said before, the ability for the players to make each other accountable in a really positive way, I think was the important thing through that time. Eventually got us on the right course. And I think, with that being integrated and blended with the abilities and character of Mark Thompson, probably helped.
So when again, I'll bring Murph in a minute, but when you did the review, I'm always fascinated with reviews. And what I love about the Geelong one, it was done by someone at Geelong, not an external person that came in. And I always find that quite strange, where you have a board, a CEO, a coach, and someone else comes in and does your review. Isn't that the role of the people at the club? Did you have a preconceived idea of what you'd see? Or were you generally thinking, I need to do this because I don't absolutely know what's happening?
I had some initial feelings about what should happen. I did, and some but I didn't want that to drive the whole thing. Yeah. And look, with reviews, I think the way I did it is that I left it pretty open. So I didn't want to say here is A and here is Z, and we're going to follow this exactly. Yep. I might find that here is an issue that we weren't even aware of. Let's explore that for a while. So we'd go get someone else in and all the rest. Okay, so that was the thing. But the review took a lot out of me because I did do it on my own.
Yeah, it was very public too.
It was very public, because everyone knew I was doing it.
I think even some of the players and officials got involved via the media.
Yeah, I asked them all 3 questions, and I got players involved. Anyway, and the 3 questions were, tell me what the football department is like now. Describe what you think it should be like in a couple of years' time. And okay, to get there, what do we need to do?
Yeah, right.
Those are the 3 questions.
Simple questions.
Very simple questions. And I had the opportunity of going to my physiotherapist and my sports scientist and asking to give me the training workloads and the GPSs. And, I could have done that. Yeah. But I didn't believe it was a scientific issue. I didn't believe that the solutions were going to be found in some sort of scientific research. Yeah. I think my best guess was it was relationship driven. And value driven. Around being accountable and those things. And so we went around all of the groups that you were talking about, the players, the coaches, the sponsors, some of our sponsors, and what they were seeing. And then I eventually went to the player leadership group. Right. Because every year we also did a player satisfaction survey.
Yeah, right.
And we did that since 1999, and this was 2006, 7 years later. And it was obvious that, and we measured things like relationship between coaches and players, relationship between medicos and players, all the relationship stuff. And it basically went like this, zoom, zoom.
Yeah, right.
And I said to the players, the player leadership group, here are the results. Yeah. Is this bullshit or is this fair income? Tell me, is this genuine? And I got the best information out of the player leadership group.
Yeah, right.
I should have gone there first.
Yeah.
And the player leadership group at that stage were becoming quite mature.
Yep.
If they were a bunch of kids, maybe I wouldn't have done that. But they were quite responsible about what they said. And basically, out of the whole thing, there was 20 recommendations, and 19 were accepted by my board. Yep. But basically, the whole thing said, Mark Thompson is a good coach. The players believe he's a bloody good coach. Yep. He better start coaching again.
Right. Yeah, he'd done too many other things.
He was so involved in so many other things. Yeah. And part of that is, by the way, delegating too much.
Yeah, for sure.
Too much, because I actually think that coaches have a really tough role.
Yeah.
The more assistant coaches they have.
The layers that have come on.
Because who's answerable to, who are the players answerable to?
Yeah.
The assistant coach or the senior coach or both?
Yeah.
And how do they do that, the players?
And there's a balance between the senior coach giving the assistants credibility by giving them work to do. So it is a bit of a matrix or a puzzle to get through. How did the conversation go with Bomber? Do you think he had awareness around what it was going to say?
Yeah, he did have awareness about what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But he also had been thinking about it for a while.
Yeah.
And he felt I had a lack of awareness around the true nature of some of the players and what they were saying.
Right. Yeah.
What do you mean? It's not all my fault.
Yeah,
I've got half a dozen senior players here who won't do the right thing.
Do this,
So, you know.
So Murph, based on the review, I'm sure you wouldn't. I mean, a lot of it's come out since, but what did you see when you first? I know you and I have spoken about it, but what did you see when you first arrived?
As I said earlier, you had Neil Baum who'd also come in, so Neil was good, and then the players were. When we first started, they sort of had to find their way through it, and so it's easy to say we're going to be, disciplined and honest and whatever it is, and then much harder to do. So I think when those initial sort of small breaches came up, I think being able to having the imprimatur of Brian and Barmy and Bomber to manage that with the leaders, and particularly Tommy and Lingy, I think that what that did was it started to drive that accountability and ownership of the playing group. And then as it went on, it didn't sort of really kick in until probably around 6 or 7.
Yep.
But it was just the Jim Collins flywheel effect. Slowly it starts to turn and people start to do the right thing more often. And then eventually it gets to the point where everyone's doing the right thing, except for perhaps a couple. And then, Tom was pretty good at listening to the leaders and then making the decision. And so there were some very difficult conversations had early. But what they did was each time another conversation was had, another player was held to account, the wheel started to turn just a bit more. And then, it burst through at Etihad Stadium or Marvel Stadium.
Against Richmond.
Yeah, against Richmond, where everyone goes, wow, what did that happen? Well, it started back before Christmas. That was the truth. But it was bit by bit. And so they were good people that slowly got everyone on board. And we've discussed this, they all bought in. And I think you were part of that?
Part of it. You were the big part of it though, mate. I mean, one of the recommendations that came out of 06 is we needed to change the terms of reference for our player leadership group and stop talking about socks and the colour of socks and let's start talking about our culture,
What is it? What are the behaviours?
What are the big things, And that's where Murph was really, really important for us. And the other thing I really enjoyed about Murph was when, not everyone bought into the system. Not everyone likes meetings. Not everyone wants to be as honest as to each other, And you had people like Matty Scarlett and Chappie a bit and
Milburn,
who sort of they just lay on the outer a bit. They didn't necessarily want to attend all the meetings. But it was obvious that if we wanted to get anything through, we needed Scarlett's approval.
To do it,
because he had too much on-field leadership. But, he didn't like all this off-field stuff, And so we quickly realised that the best way of getting his influence was to get some of his best mates to talk to him, Mooney, who was on the periphery as well. And so we'd figure out ways of making sure that other players got these other ones over the line. Anyway, so since that year, I've called Matty Scarlett the Senator. Because basically you had the House of Reps with the player leadership group, you'd had a couple of others. Then you had to get over the line, the Senators.
And Bomber also, he realised he couldn't continue the way he was going. So he said, look, I have treated players differently in the past, but I know we can't win a premiership anymore, so from now on I've got no favourites. And he said, if they leave the club, bad luck, because we can't win a flag with them.
The line in the sand, isn't it?
So that was interesting too.
Greatness often in sport, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We all face that fork in the road where you're going to go down that path and say, nah, that's where we're going to win the premiership, or we think we can do it this way? No. It doesn't work like that, does it?
It's the change or leave moment.
Yeah.
Change, or you've got to go, mate.
Yeah.
And this is how you change, and this is all the support we can give you around you. You've got to change.
So was your moment the same moment as Murph's, like that game? When did you go? What game was it when you went to the game and thought?
Look, I thought we could win a premiership the year before.
Year before?
Oh
right.
yeah. I just thought we had enough talent. So.
Yep.
And it came to me in that training moment I spoke about.
Yeah.
They didn't drop the ball for about 15 minutes, going at full pace, and I thought, this is not a bad team. I thought then, but then we'd win win really well. Then next week we'd get beaten by one of the bottom sides. It's so hard to understand.
Yeah, consistency, it's hard to get.
Yeah.
And then Brian decided to do some of the work with the his own with the admin team, and that was hilarious because I'm not sure. Do you remember your feedback that day?
Help me.
The staff said to him, "You've got to stop being upset."
With the losses.
Yeah, with the losses.
Yeah. They said I was
too upset.
Too upset with the
Yeah,
losses.
it's interesting.
And
It changed my whole persona apparently.
but then that was the week before the Richmond game. We didn't lose another game until the final round, and then we won to win the flag.
We won 20 in a row or something.
It was fantastic. Yeah. So
Well, it's great because we talk a lot about everyone's watching the leader, so it's fascinating. It's probably not affecting you, and we talk about this a lot. Even though it doesn't affect you as the CEO, clearly it was having an effect on the others, what you were doing. Are you more conscious of that now?
Yeah, I am, yeah. It's taken a while.
Yeah, has it?
Yeah, because I still get really disappointed when we lose.
Yeah.
It doesn't come natural for me to forget about it within 2 or 3 hours. I can't do that. I just make sure that I don't, I'm really down, that I don't speak to a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I sort of go in my cave for a little while.
Yeah.
I come out and I try and be a better person when I come out.
It's interesting, isn't it? What about the sustained success when you look back? I mean, we're talking now about specific incidents and meetings and things like that, but when you look at the sustained success, what are some of the real key moments in those? And obviously some we've touched on, but perhaps some that really stand out for you.
I think the honesty of people and players being really honest with their feedback. Even though at times, it mightn't have been right time, right way, right place type thing that you often preached. I think this people keeping themselves accountable is just so important. They trained as hard as they played. In fact, I think the preparation at times was much harder than the games. There was this collegiality amongst the players, but there was also this unbelievable competition between them. And sometimes, it would find its way in its contract, where Chappie would want to get paid the same as Gary Ablett because they're both premiership players, they're both playing the half-forward flank, and they're both pretty important. Had to handle that, some of the consequences of how they competed. Stevie Johnson was unbelievably competitive. So that's what I remember.
Yeah.
We talk, Cooky, about that group being so caring, but so honest, and the paradox sometimes between that is like, they would never ever shirk a conversation, regardless of how difficult it was, but they cared so deeply about each other. Sometimes it was frightening.
Yeah, I think good teams who are ultra accountable are also providing ultra support. Because they go hand in hand. You can't expect high performance all the time without providing good support. And that's why we have 30 players and 100 staff. It's 3-to-1 ratio. It's because of the support that they provide.
What about the staff? Because obviously with footy more so than any, the players get the credit, coach gets the credit, then it filters down a little bit, the assistant coach. But what about some of the staff during that period where I'm sure there's going to be too many to mention. What about staff during that period? Because I'm very big, as we all are. It's about the whole organisation. Is there some people that that never got the credit that really should have got more of the credit? I'm sure that there is, but
there always is. There always is. But if they're the right type of people, they won't worry about that. And you always miss people.
Yeah.
In the recognition stage, you always do. And the reason for that is because there is leaders at every level. They're just not at the top.
Yeah.
They're right through the layers of the organisation. So the ones that I like are the ones who show really true leadership, but they're not being paid a lot.
They're
right. They're one of the the accountants or whatever the case may be. And somehow we've got to try and recognise those in simple ways. I'm intrigued with the fire brigade. The bloke who runs into the house with the hose is not necessarily the lieutenant. He's usually a scrapper, and everyone loves him because he's respectful and he's trustful and they can depend upon him. They're the sort of people I love around the place, And if you can place them all over the joint, like 20 of them at different levels and different departments, and they don't cost you a lot, it's a pretty good place to be.
What about been a long period of success, as I said, and you've only had the two coaches really in that period. But how's the club changed over the years?
It's much more steadier. It's a business.
Yeah.
It relies on good people showing good leadership. It's strong on partnerships. It is genuine about its community impact. Its facilities are unbelievably different. And I think, we've worked on value-based leadership for 20 years. If it hasn't worked by now, we're doing something wrong. But after, say, 2 or 3 generations of players and picking leaders based on values, and we have our own values-based leadership, values-based assessment, which we try and align with our company values, our club values. So we've come a long way in developing all sorts of things around our values. And I think that's the key. I'm not sure old Geelong, inverted commas, with respect, had any of those things.
Do you think, I'm interested in this, you say it's a business. Do you think that the club has lost any of the romance of it's a footy club.
Yeah.
In the development of the club as a business.
Good point. As you increase in the number of stakeholders and the type of stakeholders, whether it be your audience on television, whether it be the City of Greater Geelong and their systems, whether it be the AFL, whether it be the sponsors, the donors through your Our Ambition programs, your philanthropic program, they're all layers that matter.
Yeah.
And they do add to the success of your footy club.
Yeah.
So it's no longer seen as this just win a premiership, otherwise you're a failure. That's gone. That in terms of internally in our foot, that's gone. But you've still got to make sure that you've got enough emphasis and energy going into that area, more so than any other area, because it makes the other areas work a bit. But the club has become much more sophisticated, has many more layers, and has much more depth. So it relies on dollars as well. We don't simply rely on our traditional supporters. We can't.
You can't.
We've got to rely on them to some degree, but we have to depend as much on developing new people all the time and new markets. That's why Hawthorn went to Tassie. That's why North gone to Tassie.
What about, with success breeds expectation. And I think you're right. People at good football clubs understand that there's just not one successful team a year. There's a lot of successful football teams. But externally, that's not necessarily the case.
No.
As we all know, being involved in football. And your own success has bred expectation. How has that pressure come on to the footy club that has been successful? But externally, people go, well, Geelong don't win a premiership, Hawthorn don't win a premiership, or Sydney don't win a premiership, they're unsuccessful. How have you coped with that over the last 4 or 5 years?
With difficulty, we really have. Last year, our research with our members showed that by about round 8, I think it was, last year, that 88% felt we're going to make the top 8, and 72% said that we're going to make the top 4.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed.
Yeah, no,
over the years.
Yeah, right.
And I'm thinking, what happens if we finish ninth? We're in
you
trouble.
Send back out
We're
to
in
you
trouble.
and you if we get ninth. Send that back to
No,
them.
we haven't, no. But there's high expectation. I won't go through the figures, but we have the highest win-loss ratio for last 10, last 20 and last 30 years. So we've been doing something right, albeit we haven't won as many premierships as I would have liked. Our win-loss ratio has been well and truly up there. And you come up with all sorts of reasons, but it has set an expectation, there is no doubt. And it's under the equalisation scheme, as you know, it gets tougher.
Yeah, it's tough.
Unless you get everything right, your recruiting right, your medico's right, the whole thing,
Is that a conversation you've had to have with Scotty? Like, obviously, at times to sort of say, I mean, without giving away, because everyone's expectation is loosely to win a premiership, but I absolutely agree with you. The number of times that I had discussion with the Swans board around, well, what does success look like? Success looks like a great brand, which is Geelong, great sponsors that want to be part of it, members that want to turn up. That's fundamentally success. Now, what drives that is winning, and you get a couple of premierships on the way. It's not bad, but what are those conversations you've had to have with staff along that?
Yeah, no, I've had discussion with Scotty on that, and we both agreed they were a bit harsh, the expectations.
Yeah,
but Scotty feels it.
100%.
On the weekend we were, we won by a couple of points, and we got smashed.
I can't believe it.
We got smashed because we had 2 goals each at halftime, which I understand is not the most entertaining to probably some viewers, but. It's interesting. I think often at Geelong it's been a bit player-centric. It's been, when I first arrived, it was about individual worship of Gary Ablett Senior and the lads, the Bairstows and all those guys, and people just adored them. They wanted statues of them and all those sort of things, So and the reason I bring that up is because when you lose, it's the coach's fault, and when you win, it's the players doing it. And somehow that the balance is not right at Geelong still.
Yeah, right. That's interesting.
Yeah, we've changed the culture a fair bit. I reckon. I think we've become more team driven than we used to be, not as individually driven as once was. I think the members have noted that, the supporters have. But there is still this element of, expectation, unreal expectation.
And we're talking a lot about footy, Cooky, but the truth about your legacy at Geelong is it's far greater than the on-field performance. The Geelong is probably, by the time the stand's finished, which I think's coming up, isn't it?
Yeah, it will happen pretty soon, I hope.
Yeah, and so
we've got the money.
Yeah, so by the time that's finished, Geelong will be the best regional facility probably in Australia. And the work you've put into that, it's amazing, because it's almost been single-handed between you and Frank, lobbying governments, securing the funding, and then getting the development done. Talk us through that a bit.
You're right. It's been fine. Most stadiums are building one go. The Optus Stadium in Perth is 1.2 billion one go. All the money come from the state. I can go through Australia. I'm not going to do that and take it and waste your time. But at our place, this is the 5th stage. Started in 2000, the planning. First stage started in 2005, the construction. Each stage has had at least five funders, 3 levels of government, AFL and the club, at least 5. And stage 4, we actually threw in 70 donors as well. And so just imagine and everyone had their own desires and wants and needs, and we had to present a different proposal to each one of those layers for each of the 5 stages. So, and there was one stage, stage 4, that I saw around about 80 individual MPs in Canberra individually, just to try and impress upon them the importance of that stage. And that's only one layer of one stage. So it's taken an immense amount of time and effort from a lot of people in our footy club and our consultants to get to the stage. But it's been a 20-year project. We're onto the last stage now.
It's amazing, isn't it, the journey of a football club? It never sort of finishes, yet it's almost a start-up every year because of the very nature of the game. So I want to take you into 2021 because, I mean, the good thing about footy clubs, it is fundamentally a start-up every year, but we've probably always thought nothing's going to affect football. It's so popular, it's so big, it's just going to keep rolling along. Where do you see 2021? I mean, we've got to get through this year first, but if we're looking into the future, using your experience, people are talking about list sizes, soft cap's definitely going to go down, money's not going to... So clearly we're going to have to make some adjustments, but as your best guess, what will that look like?
It'll be a reset of the football economy. There's no doubt about that. We'll get through this year. A lot will depend on whether we find adequate treatments and a vaccination for the coronavirus. Otherwise, my opinion is we'll have a long tail, longer than people think, and it will affect 2021. If there is any serious hint of border closures next year, being continuous, I think, and games not being played in front of crowds, then I think you will find a hell of a hole will occur with our membership and our sponsorships. Television might be okay because the ratings are good and they'll be maintained. But I think that the likelihood of resetting on multiple occasions might happen.
Is that what I'm saying? Is my first year out of footy, to be honest, I was supposed to be overseas, but my first year out of football, second year since I started in 1980. Can we be objective in such an emotional business? Because what I'm seeing in the last week is just obscene in terms of where the game's at. It's a shortened game. Players haven't been able to train. They can't even train in groups yet. We're talking about the state of the game because we're so emotionally attached to the game. It's just obscene how emotional we get. We don't have a capacity to rationally assess the situation. And so, well, maybe the game on the weekend, Geelong and Melbourne, is simply because they're shortened games. Players aren't as well prepared. There's so many external factors. Do we have a capacity to rationally assess where the game goes?
Right now, probably not.
No.
Because everything's changing so quickly. I'm finding that, even in the bigger decisions, the ones you make are sometimes wrong a week later. So we're in a contingent world right now, and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know the answers. That's the true response to your question before. I don't know.
But when our game's on every week, you don't get a breather. We don't get, if you're Nissan or Bunnings or something like that, you can at least sort of say, well, even if it's going to change. But when the game's on, people react so quickly in our game, don't they?
They do, they do. The only thing we can control right now, is processes. And if you've got the best processes, you've got a chance. If the processes aren't good and you're relying on one person making the decisions, you're in trouble. Because it ain't going to work. Because he doesn't know or she doesn't know. Really. So it's best to get as much information as you can and make decisions on the run if you have to. So you can control the process. You can't control the outcomes. That's what I've learned out of all of this.
We talk about it all the time. But in amongst that, Cooky, you also have to have good people and good values because they will help you make the processes better as well. One of the things we haven't spoken about is the development of people at Geelong. I know you've always been really strong on finding good people, developing them. And when you sit back, you must be really proud of the number of people who have come through the club and have gone off to other clubs.
Yeah, lots of people become CEOs,
Yeah, you've had a big say in it.
A pig for values and train the skills, Look, I think that Geelong has been a pretty good breeding ground now for a lot of other clubs, both players and coaches. So it's something we're proud of. We identify our new staff based on their talents, but also on their good values. Okay, so that's really important. We try and make sure that people don't become leaders, formal leaders, unless they have a good assessment of their values. Okay, we try and ensure that people don't get bonuses unless the values are being demonstrated properly. For a footy club, they normally have about $200,000 in their learning and development budget. We have $500,000. And that doesn't include amount of money we keep for our coaches, which come from a coaches club.
Yep.
So we have this coaches club of 20 people, and 1/3 of their income goes for coach education. So, and you know, I shouldn't say this out too loud, but I have directors who actually donate dollars for the executives to go to Harvard. And so all in all, you know, there's about $1 million being spent. Yeah. That's excluding the AFLPA, who spent, you know, probably another 300,000 or 400,000 on the players and all the things they do. Yeah. So we're forever trying to, you know, develop our people under good leadership, but also giving them opportunities elsewhere to try and learn more.
You did it yourself, didn't you? You went to Harvard?
You went to Harvard's advanced management program back in 2013. Yeah. And that was I loved it, you know. It was 3 months away from work. It was hard work. Yeah. And but it was the best thing I'd ever done. It's fantastic.
What did you bring back?
Oh, simple things. It was attended by 150 people, 60 different countries. I learned more about diversity and inclusion than I learned my previous 50 years. I learned simple things like, you know, you can't be a good leader unless you're a good person first. Hey, hello.
Can you say that again?
And, you know, I'm thinking it cost me, it was about $100,000 the cost of the course. And I've come back with this beauty, you know.
That's a rip-off.
You should have given me
just simple
50,
things like that. You know, things that I remember. And when you're going through hell, keep going. Yeah. You know, just things that I remember.
Yeah, simple things.
Simple things that arouse me a bit. I enjoyed it.
What about you personally? I mean, you've been so successful, done an incredible job. What do you still want to achieve? Is there something you want to do again? Which obviously, but is there something you want to do again? Or is there something you sort of think, I really didn't tick that box? Or
I want to see Geelong come through CV19. Yeah, that's really important for me. Yeah. But it's interesting because, you know, the last I'd say 5 or maybe even 10 years, but maybe it's 5 to 10 years. It's more about them than it is about me.
Yeah, exactly.
And that wasn't like that 20 years ago.
No.
It was all about me, and you know, my agenda and my plan and my career and my ambition, you know, and you know.
Yeah, what can you do?
What can I do? You know. And what can they do for me? But honestly and genuinely, I can actually say that my role now is to get the best out of my people and make them good leaders, either at our club or somewhere else. You know, Steve Hocking at the AFL. I was wrapped when he went there. I didn't care. That's not true. I loved it when he went there because it was a great promotion for him, and it was a great accolade on our footy club. So no, I'm not that worried about the rest of my career and what it looks like.
Murph, I'm going to leave the last question to you, which I normally do.
Yeah, I think it's Cooky's like, you know, you've read his bio and he's the most admired, I suspect, Australian sport administrator because of his record. It's phenomenal. Like, and when you get to know this guy, he lives it. Like it's not just words. No, you can't survive this long if it is words. Like that's the truth. I remember.
Got to do what you say, mate.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember tell a quick story on that because I remember reading an article, Cooky, in the paper. I sent him a text. So I won't say what the text said, but I sent him a text message.
I remember that
because it was around values and behaviours and all that sort of stuff. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I think Cooky's been a mentor and a father figure and an inspirational role model. We talk to so many people in the industry, Brian, so many people. I know Tommy Harley, he's now the CEO of Sydney Swans. Tom and I often talk and he says, you know, the first person I ring's Brian. And so I think your legacy is an amazing legacy because it's impacted so many different people across the journey in such a positive way, and you've always been very fair across the journey. So
thank you. Yeah,
I think that's quite inspirational. But what would you say to a young Brian if you were starting out now? Like, what would be your advice?
I would say get out of your own head. Start thinking about other people more.
Interesting.
That would be my first thing.
Did you need to do that though to get to where you got to? Do you think?
Yeah, you need to have some amount of consideration and empathy. There's no doubt about that. But you said early days, and in my early days, it was all about me. Honestly, it wasn't good. Yeah. I won a premiership as a coach, at lower levels. Yeah. But I wasn't a bloody good coach. I can tell you that I wasn't. Because of the other stuff. I think that I think that's really important, just to get out of your own head a bit and have empathy and sympathy and respect for other people. That would be number one thing, and it'd be easy for me to say, learn about diversity and inclusion a lot more, but 30 years ago was a different world.
Yeah.
Mate, well done. It's been an incredible conversation today, and well done on what you've done. I think Murphy summed it up really well, and you were up close and personal, working in the environment, but what you've created at the Geelong Footy Club, and I think that's in. I talk about leadership. I don't know whether leaders understand the impact that they have, and there's never been a more important time to be a great role model and a great leader. And I know, Murph, it's something we're really passionate about, and we try and live and breathe. But you walk the walk, not just talk the talk, and that's something that's incredibly. So thanks for sharing the story, mate. It's been a great hour we've spent with you.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Murph. Thanks again for your input. He probably didn't quite give you the credit I thought he was going to give you, but
no, we all know that it's made up of a lot of people, a lot of things that go right to win a premiership, Brian.
And I think that's the thing. I think in wrapping it up, it's never about one person.
No, it's never about one person.
That's probably the unfortunate thing about being involved in a footy club. Is not everyone gets the credit. It always goes to a few people. But I think you've articulated incredibly well. Again, the role model leader, the behaviours, the honest conversations, all the things that we live and breathe. And the great thing about a footy club, people can see the results. So then, I don't know how they did it, but once you articulate it, it's a really good flagship for leadership, because people can see it on the field every single week, and they actually go, oh, that's why Geelong did it, or that's why Sydney did it, or that's why Hawthorn did it. And it always comes back to the same thing. Great people, great culture, great behaviours. So thanks, mate. Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Murph. Well done again.
Thanks, Rosie. Thanks, Cooky.
Thanks very much.
And we will see you again. That was the Culture Couch, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks a lot.